Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Caroline Brewin. She is a former investment banker turned confidence coach, CEO of Brain Powered Coaching, published author, trainer, passionate speaker, and thought leader on the neuroscience of confidence. Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you, Ajay. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about how one can build unshakable confidence using neuroscience. But before that, let's learn a bit more about you, about your background, about your journey, so that the audience learns as much as possible about who the speaker is.
Of course. My name is Caroline. I am based in the UK now. I have lived in the UK, Australia, and Singapore. In my previous life, being in investment banking, and I traveled the world, and I did lots of different roles, from leadership roles to individual roles. And there was one thing that I saw, which was consistent wherever I went, which was how often people lack confidence and what a massive impact that has on their lives. And so I had 18 years in investment banking. I was a chief of staff and kind of more towards the final stages of my career. And that was when I trained to be a professional coach. So I did professional coaching as well as an applied neuroscience training as well. And what I've done in my business, Brain Powered Coaching, is bring all of those together. And so I run training programs for individuals and corporates, focused primarily on the neuroscience of confidence.
Right, right. So, what's the connection between neuroscience and confidence? I thought confidence is confidence. Do something, become good at it, and then you are confident about it. But this is my understanding. I want your understanding, much
Yeah.
more educated understanding for the audience. What is confidence? What is the connection between neuroscience and confidence?
Well, so I think what you put your finger on there is what is a way that a lot of people describe confidence, in that it's associated with competence. So there's something called the confidence competence loop, which there is definitely a connection between our competence level, so how good we are at a skill or a particular role or whatever that context is, and how confident we feel. But there is so much more than that. So imagine confidence is an iceberg. So above the water is the competence piece, but underneath the water are all the things like our self-belief, how we talk to ourselves, what kind of language, what kind of radio we have playing in our mind all day. You're not good enough. You shouldn't be here. Don't speak up. It looks at our values, who we believe we are, where we've come from. And there's also a piece around our identity too. So confidence, there's also a piece from a genetics perspective. There is some evidence to go towards the fact that confidence, some of that could be associated with some actual physical genetic capability as well. So there's lots of pieces of the puzzle. The neuroscience piece comes in because when you understand how your brain works, you can then understand how much that is connected to your behavior, and then how you can actually use that and manage that in order to be more confident.
Right, right, Caroline. So, how do we gain this confidence? Should we change the frequency at which we are listening, that radio we change, or how do we do that? Do we change the way we listen, or should we change the frequency about what we listen? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing I would say, if you're looking at confidence, is understand what true confidence is. And true confidence is about being 100% unapologetically yourself. Because the thing is that if we aren't truly confident, if we are a different person internally to who we are externally, who we show the world, what our brain is saying is, well, hang on a minute, I know that's not me. and who I am externally isn't good enough, because there's an incongruence between the two. So part of confidence is about integrating your internal and external authenticity. So it's the bringing the two of those together. So from that place, and when we understand that, being truly confident is about being ourselves, there's this wonderful permission that you have to step out into the world, because no one can tell you you're doing it wrong, because it's you. And so from that place of self-awareness, which also I mentioned around values, understanding where you've come from, understanding yourself at a deep level, that is a wonderful step off in terms of, okay, let's look at things like the inner critic. So I like to call it the gremlin, how we can actually manage that negative voice. But the negative voice is there from a neuroscience perspective, because actually, from an evolutionary point of view, it's there to protect us. So we have this concept of a negativity bias. And a negativity bias means that the way that our brain is constantly scanning the environment, it's looking for danger. And that's because in caveman days, the caveman who was sunning himself, having a pina colada, and not looking out for the killer mammoth that might be coming towards him, he obviously didn't survive. Whereas the ones who are looking out for danger, they're the ones who did survive. And so we have something called the amygdala in our brain, which is part of our brain, which is looking for this danger. It's like a smoke alarm. And so all the time, we are highlighting the negative. We're noticing the negative things. So if we want to build up our confidence, we need to shape how our brain sees the world and shift that negative to see more positive. And then we'll be much more likely to be able to see that we are the good things that we're doing in our lives.
Right, right. So you talked about being truly confident. How to be truly confident? A lot of people believe, that uh, whatever I feel from inside, it does not matter. Fake it till I make it, and then
Yes.
you look confident. There's a lot of courses where your body language will make you look confident
Yep.
till you actually become confident, truly confident, till the time. So how does this work? Should we look at becoming truly confident first, or should we become the fake confidence till we do become truly confident, and everything will be the world will look at it the way they used to look at it. Only I know the truth. Help us understand what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, well, so different things work for different people, right? And I think some people find that even that phrase "fake it till you make it" as something which really really rubs up against their values, like I'm not being real. And so I sometimes say, okay, well, maybe rather than saying "fake it till you make it," just try something on. Try something a little bit different. And I call these micro confidence challenges. And the thing is that the way that we can grow our confidence levels is by very gently just stepping a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And, for one person, that could be, all right, I'm going to stand up on stage and I'm going to do a presentation, or, sing a song in a competition. For other people, it may be something as simple as asking a question in a meeting. And so whatever that looks like for you, it's about stepping just that little bit outside of the comfort zone. And then, and this is crucial, rewarding yourself, acknowledging what you've done and saying, you know what, I'm really proud of myself for trying that. And what happens then is you actually get, there's a dopamine piece, which is a neurotransmitter, which is about the pursuit of things. It keeps us moving forward. And actually that celebration and that feeling of I'm really proud of myself is a sense of serotonin, which is another neurotransmitter, which is about feeling good in that moment. And so the combination of those means that actually we are much more likely to keep going, even in the face of challenges over time. So the one tip that I would give people in terms of that, where do I start, is by looking back at what you have done. because so many of us, we get to the next point and we just move the bar. I don't know whether you've had that experience. I've achieved so much, I want that next thing. And you achieve it, it's a promotion, maybe a pay rise. And you get to that point, and a couple of days later, you're like, well, what's next? And no wonder our confidence doesn't grow or even diminishes, because we put in all that work and often sacrificed friends, family, personal life, sleep. And our brain says, well, hang on a minute, I put all that work in and it wasn't good enough. Maybe I'm not enough. So if we spend the time to actually say, okay, where have I come from and what can I celebrate about who I am and what I've achieved, then we can start to actually really understand how incredible we are and start to build up that confidence.
Okay. So after climbing every peak, stay there for some time, enjoy
Yes.
that moment, let the brain understand that it has achieved what it wanted to, and then maybe after some time, you put in the next part of your journey into it. Is that
Absolutely.
what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Celebrate it. So a really practical way you can do it is every Monday morning, I do my celebrations. I have a card and I write down what I'm celebrating from the last week. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I find that often people, if they ask me what I've done at the weekend, I don't remember on a Monday morning. So, we remember the negative things, remember the negativity bias, but we don't necessarily remember the good stuff. So actually having a practice, a deliberate practice of I'm going to write down what I've done well, it makes you actually tune into that. And then you get, oh, actually, I have done some good stuff. Tick. And, from a biological perspective, that's that dopamine. Yes, well done. And that is going to continue to help to push you to continue more.
Right, right. And what about overconfidence? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I get this question a lot. It's a really interesting question. So I think it goes back to a little bit what you were talking about around being authentic, because often overconfidence is actually hiding something. People who are overconfident, and I've had several people who I've worked with, they're the ones, the loud ones who are, maybe deemed as overconfident or arrogant. And in fact, they've put their hands up and said, I'm terrified.
Huh?
So, I always think, for those of you who maybe are a little bit more introverted and are looking at the people who are standing in front with the bravado, maybe take a little solace in that perhaps there's something underneath that, which is a little bit driven by insecurity as well. But overconfidence on the whole, I think particularly women, I would say there's a long way to go before we're overconfident. I think we judge ourselves a lot, and I think there's clearly an environmental piece in terms of the environment we're in and how that judges us as being, overconfident or arrogant. But I would say, on the whole, we probably got quite a way to go before we're judged as that, and that's that's an actual truth.
Right, right, Caroline. What about, perception? How do people perceive confidence in others? If you are authentic, sometimes you may not look confident. That may be not so good for you, especially in office or anywhere else. Maybe personal life, it is okay. So how does that work? Means, how do people perceive? What is the best way to be perceived in an office setup? People talk about vulnerability. People talk
Mm,
about authenticity. Do
mm.
we have that much room in today's time? Because you talked about being negative less. Now, if we have been programmed since ages by always looking at the danger, the mammoth may not be there, but there are bigger mammoths in today's time. If we start, look at the social media, look at the scams, spams,
Yep.
frauds, phishing, and so many more. If we become positive, these mammoths will enter your mind. It will rob you with whatever you have. How does this work? Because people tend to become positive, and then all the confidence will be gone. If any of these things find entry into your defense, help us understand then, what is my
Mm,
confidence? How much should I? Is it brittle? Is it flexible? How does
mm.
that work?
Wow, there's a lot in there. I mean, I think there's a authenticity when it comes down to it, like I touched on at the beginning, is where true confidence comes from. And I think we know the leaders who are truly authentic, who are truly confident, the ones who are able to stand up and say, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but we are going to fight this together, and we're going to go through and find out the answer to that together. And from my experience, from a leadership perspective, that's when the team starts to love you. So Brené Brown talks about vulnerability in her book, Daring Greatly. And she talks about the fact that vulnerability is actually courage. People talk about vulnerability and may see it as weakness. And that's not the case at all. It takes a lot to stand up and say, you know what, I'm frightened too. And that sense of authenticity, that's when we connect with people. So taking that a step further in terms of what you were talking about in terms of the environment, what I'm hearing there is, maybe, do people take advantage of you? Or the world takes advantage of people. And it reminds me of a story of I had a picture taken for my global directory when I was in the bank I was working. And it was a picture, I kind of had my arms folded and I was smiling. And one of my team came up to me and she said, Caroline, I love your picture. She said, because it says, I'm nice, but don't mess with me. And I was like, that's it. I am nice. And you know what? I will fight for my team. I will fight for the people around me, my clients, but don't mess with me. There is a line. And this is where part of confidence is about understanding boundaries and being able to articulate boundaries to people very clearly, and doing that upfront is even better. So one of the things which I really encourage people to do, whether it's a relationship, with your family, with work people, as a leader, is talk to people about your values. Because if you can say, you know what, respect is really important to me, and how that shows up is, please don't be late. Or if you don't say please and thank you, I'm going to get really cross. Or, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, so fairness is really important to me. I was fighting over food when I was younger. So for me, that shows up in terms of, anything from having a meritocracy at work to making sure that if I'm being poured a glass of wine, make sure it's equal to the other person's. So when you can understand and have that level of self-awareness, then you can articulate that to other people and manage that environment and the way that you're interacting with people in a really confident way. But that's not arrogance. It's not in a horrible way that people need to feel like you're bossing them around. It's saying, this is me, this is how I operate, and tell me about you too, and how we're going to work together.
Right, Caroline. Let's look at this way: power and confidence. Does power bring you confidence, or confidence brings you power? Power, as in the the chair,
Yeah.
the position. A
The
lot of
position.
times
Yeah.
you'll find people go unnoticed, and suddenly one fine morning they have gotten either name, fame,
Mm,
or a chair, the top chair in the office, the top post. And
mm.
people find them all good things, within them, even confidence, all the good qualities come up all of a sudden. Everyone discovers them as to be great leaders. How do we look at this?
Yeah.
Help us understand.
Great question. So I have coached lots of people at a very senior level, and I can tell you that power does not bring confidence. Plenty of them are terrified. And even more so as they move up through the corporate ladder. Because all of a sudden, there's more and more expectation of who they feel they should be. And this is where the concept of imposter syndrome often comes up. And this is where we have a feeling that we're a fraud. And imposter syndrome is context dependent. So it's completely, you can be fine one day and then all of a sudden you're promoted. You are in the chair of power and you're thinking, I don't deserve to be here. Like, I am terrified. And often that's where we see the kind of the response is overcompensating, pretending that I'm very confident. And actually, you know, that really, where you end up with a horrible boss who's bossing people around and actually the truth is they're hiding their terror, the fact that they're very, very scared. And actually, from the research we've done, so we've surveyed over 17,000 people, and we've found that 52% of both men and women experience imposter syndrome often, a lot of the time. So if you go into a room and sit around a table, 50% of the people in that room may be experiencing imposter syndrome, which part of the thing about imposter syndrome is that we're all sitting there thinking, it's only me, like I'm the only one. And that is really reducing our confidence levels. But once you understand, well, hang on a minute, actually, this is something which is really common. And in fact, what it's doing is showing you that you are pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. It's actually something to celebrate.
Right, Caroline. So let's look at confidence from both men and women point of view. Is confidence the same for men and women, or men look confidence differently, women look confidence differently? How does it work?
Yeah. So this has been a really interesting process that I've gone through in terms of learning about men and women. So as I said, when I started my journey, I had been a woman in the finance industry. So I was really passionate, and still I'm very passionate about that. But what I found was over time, men would come to me for executive coaching. And as would I'd roll out my programs within companies, and they'd start with their women because, you know, from a DEI perspective, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, that's their focus area. But now the companies are saying, well, hang on a minute, what about the men? Maybe we should give them an opportunity to learn about the neuroscience of confidence. So we've subsequently rolled it out to all the way through the companies. And in fact, a lot of the men have signed up voluntarily to do that training. And what's been really interesting, like the example I gave before, men saying, I'm terrified. Like, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I doubt myself. My inner critic is at me all the time. And so I guess where I started was men have a lot more confidence than women. Now, from my actual experience and from the research we're seeing, there is a difference. There is a small difference. So, for example, when we look overall, around 77% of people don't speak up in meetings because they doubt themselves. But when you break that down, when you look underneath it, it's 73% of women and 66% of men. So there is a difference. 90% of people question themselves and second guess their decisions. 91% of women, 87% of men. So, you know, these aren't significant differences. I think what the difference is, and there is some evidence around this from a testosterone perspective. I think that a lot of the time the guys feel the fear, but do it anyway. So
Right.
maybe the lack of confidence is there, but that higher risk taking, which comes with having a higher level of testosterone, there is that piece of maybe they care a little bit less. So the fact that women we're wired to bond more with people. So coming back to that evolutionary element to things, from an evolutionary point of view, we are the weaker sex. And so we are built to try and build better tribes. The way we interact is trying to mend things much more, whereas the males are much more about hunting, that kind of much more driven. And so as a result of that, perhaps we actually we're more people pleasers. And I talk broadly here. There are a whole spectrum of men and women, and how the kind of from a gender perspective, how you show up between that. But there is some evidence to suggest that might be the case.
Right. What about power dressing? Does that bring confidence with lots of new sort of a thing? How does that work? Is it
Yeah.
only for yourself, or others see it much more better for themselves?
Well, I mean, the reality is that we live in an environment where looks matter, and whether that's right or wrong. If someone turns up and they're dressed in tracksuit bottoms and a scruffy t-shirt, and someone else turns up in a really sharp, beautiful cashmere suit, we're going to have a different perception of those two people. The person in a scruffy t-shirt could be the billionaire. The person in the cashmere suit could be an estate agent. So, the society absolutely cares in terms of what that looks like. And part of that is in terms of, okay, well, who do you surround yourself with? And, how much does that matter to them? Having said that, from a personal perspective, I know that I feel different when I've got a pair of trainers on versus a pair of slippers. Times when I have struggled, there was a time when I was really struggling at work and I was going into a really big meeting, and my coach said to me, Caroline, put on your best dress. I want you to put on your highest heels, and I want you to go in there and own it. And that was exactly what I did. I was like, and I changed my body structure. I was doing my power posing, arms in the air, going, I can do this. I am strong. I'm resilient. I'm positive. And as a result of that, I went into that meeting and I owned that space. So yes, these things do matter.
These things do matter. How does a confident woman look, and how does a confident man look? Is there a particular image that people look for?
I think that's it's a feeling, right? Maybe, you could, if I was to show you two pictures and you would say, that's a confident woman, that's a confident man. If I was to give you a whole range of pictures, but so much of that is associated with bias. And the reality is, if you go into a room and you interact with people, however they are dressed, we know, we can sense the people who are truly confident, who are really authentic. And that's the bit which comes back to right at the beginning of our conversation, that real confidence comes from within. And when you trust yourself, because you know yourself, you can own that space better than anyone else. And it doesn't matter what you're dressed like.
Right, Caroline. So where do they get their confidence? Both of them, men, women, they go deep within and find confidence for themselves? Or should I ask you this way, that do they shop from the same place, this thing called confidence?
I love it. A lot of time, yes. I think they do. I think they do that. So, like I said, when knowing yourself, so you can trust yourself. So absolutely, both of you go to the shop and understand where you come from. understand who you are, what's important to you, what are your values, and what are you saying to yourself that's holding you back? And then you can start to change that language. And ultimately, when you start to swim in that area and really get to know yourself much, much better, from that point forward, you can then start to pull in different tools and techniques like the micro confidence challenge that I mentioned, stretching yourself, and understanding more about the neuroscience, how your brain works, how you can, things like dopamine and serotonin and all of those kind of things. These are all tools that both men and women can use. And maybe you might dress a little bit differently, but I think certainly the shop is the same.
Right. One last question, Caroline, is
Yeah.
that a confident man, many times, they attract a lot of people around them. People want to be around. Sometimes a confident woman is looked a bit differently, perhaps in a different manner. There is talk, and even women may not be wanting to be close that way. Why is it that they do not look at this confidence, the same achievement in men and women? Is it the problem on the other side, or is it the ones who are looking at it?
Yeah, I think sadly that is society and how we have labeled that. The truth is that from a very young age, girls are told that being quiet is being good. And so we get more positive reinforcement from being a good girl, which means, sit down, be quiet, don't cause a fuss. Whereas boys are boisterous, running around more, and that is encouraged. The language is, oh, it's just the boys. And so from a very young age, and how society has then shaped itself, is that women should be quieter. And so therefore we're labeled when we are someone who maybe is speaking out more, who is putting their point across. There's this tiny little tightrope which we're walking, which is, don't be arrogant, but, be assertive. And we're on this very, very narrow tightrope that we're allowed to be on. Whereas imagine men are running around in a field. They can show up in so many different ways without that level of judgment. So I think it's really tough for women. And that's where we need to give women a much better, a bigger field to play on, and accept them for how they show up. And that beauty of themselves and their potential can show up in so many different ways. And we should celebrate all of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Caroline. There is so much to learn about confidence and all those things associated with it. I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more from you about all these things, and also be, get help from your brain powered coaching. So what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm brain powered coaching on all the social platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Caroline Brewin on LinkedIn, if anyone wants to link in with me. And then my website is brainpoweredcoaching.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.